Marcus Williams stood in front of the bathroom mirror, adjusting his tie for the third time that morning. The black silk felt like a noose around his neck, and his hands trembled slightly as he smoothed down the fabric. Today was the day he had been dreading for months. After 12 years of marriage, he and Elena were finally going to court to finalize their divorce. The house felt eerily quiet around him. Elena had moved out 6 months ago, taking with her the laughter that used to echo through these halls, the smell of her morning coffee, and the gentle hum of her voice as she talked on the phone with her sister. Now, only the ticking of the grandfather clock in the hallway marked the passage of time, each second bringing him closer to the moment when their marriage would officially end. Marcus walked downstairs, his footsteps echoing on the hardwood floors that Elena had insisted on installing 3 years ago. She had been so excited about that renovation, spending weeks picking out the perfect shade of oak, discussing with contractors, and planning how the new floors would transform their home. Now, those same floors felt cold and unwelcoming, a reminder of dreams they had shared but would never fulfill together. The kitchen still smelled faintly of Elena's lavender hand soap, though she hadn't lived here for half a year. Marcus poured himself a cup of coffee from the machine he never quite learned to operate properly. Elena had always been the one to make their morning coffee, knowing exactly how much cream he liked and which mug was his favorite. The coffee tasted bitter and wrong, but he drank it anyway, needing the caffeine to face what lay ahead. His lawyer, James Morrison, had called the night before to confirm the details. It should be straightforward, he had assured Marcus. Elena's attorney has already submitted all the necessary paperwork. The property division has been agreed upon, there are no children involved, and she's not seeking alimony. Judge Henderson likes to keep these proceedings brief and professional. But nothing about this felt straightforward to Marcus. How could 12 years of shared life, of building dreams together, of weathering storms and celebrating victories, be reduced to a stack of legal documents and a judge's signature? How could the woman he had promised to love forever become just another appointment on his calendar? He grabbed his keys from the kitchen counter, next to a small potted plant that Elena had left behind. The poor thing was barely alive, its leaves brown and drooping. Marcus had tried to keep it watered, but he lacked Elena's green thumb. She had always been the one to nurture things, to make them grow and flourish. Without her, even the plants seemed to sense that something vital was missing from this house. The drive to the courthouse took 23 minutes through the morning traffic. Marcus found himself taking the long route, past the coffee shop where he and Elena had their first date, past the park where he had proposed on a snowy December evening 7 years ago, past the flower shop where he used to buy her surprise bouquets just because he saw something beautiful and thought of her. Each familiar landmark felt like a wound being reopened. The city they had explored together hand in hand now felt foreign and hostile. The places that held their happiest memories now served as monuments to everything that had gone wrong between them. Marcus parked in the courthouse lot and sat in his car for a few minutes, gathering his courage. Through the windshield, he could see other people walking up the steps to the imposing brick building. Some looked nervous, others determined, and a few appeared resigned. He wondered how many of them were here for the same reason he was, to legally end something that had once meant everything to them. His phone buzzed with a text message from his brother David. "Thinking of you today, man. Call me when it's over. We'll grab a beer and talk." David had never liked Elena, though he had been careful not to say so directly. He had always thought she was too demanding, too focused on her career, too unwilling to compromise. "She's changing you," he had warned Marcus more than once. "You're not the same guy you used to be." Maybe David had been right. Maybe Marcus had lost himself somewhere in the 12 years of trying to be the husband Elena wanted him to be. Or maybe Elena had been right when she accused him of never really growing up, of being content to drift through life without ambition or purpose while she worked 60-hour weeks at her marketing firm, climbing the corporate ladder with determination and skill. The truth, Marcus knew, was probably somewhere in between. They had both changed, both made mistakes, both failed to bridge the growing distance between them. The woman who used to laugh at his silly jokes had become someone who rolled her eyes when he spoke. The man who used to surprise her with romantic gestures had become someone who forgot their anniversary 2 years in a row. Marcus checked his watch. 10 minutes until the hearing was scheduled to begin. He took a deep breath, locked his car, and walked toward the courthouse steps. Each step felt heavy, as if he were walking through mud or sand, as if the very air around him had become thick and resistant. Inside the courthouse, the security line moved slowly. Marcus emptied his pockets, removed his belt, and walked through the metal detector. The security guard, a middle-aged woman with kind eyes, smiled at him sympathetically. "First time here?" she asked. "Hopefully the last," Marcus replied, trying to force a smile. "They usually are," she said gently. "Good luck, honey." The elevator ride to the third floor felt eternal. Marcus shared the cramped space with a young couple holding hands tightly, probably here to get married, and an older man in a rumpled suit who looked like he hadn't slept in days. The contrast was stark and painful. Family Court was located at the end of a long hallway lined with wooden benches. A few people sat scattered along these benches, some reading newspapers, others staring blankly at their phones, and a few simply waiting in contemplative silence. The air smelled of floor wax and stress. Marcus found James Morrison waiting for him outside courtroom 3B. His lawyer was a thin man in his 50s with graying hair and a reassuring manner that had made Marcus feel confident about his choice of legal representation. James had handled hundreds of divorce cases over his career and had a reputation for keeping things civil and efficient. "How are you holding up?" James asked, shaking Marcus's hand. "I've been better," Marcus admitted. "Have you seen Elena?" "Not yet. She and her attorney should be here soon. Remember what we discussed. This is just a formality. The hard work is already done. Judge Henderson will review the agreement, ask a few standard questions, and sign the decree. You'll be out of here in 30 minutes. Marcus nodded, though his stomach was churning with anxiety. 30 minutes to officially end 12 years of marriage. It seemed both too long and impossibly short. They waited on one of the wooden benches, James reviewing his notes while Marcus watched people come and go through the courthouse doors. Families reuniting after difficult proceedings. Lawyers hurrying between courtrooms with overstuffed briefcases, court clerks carrying stacks of files that represented the legal entanglements of dozens of lives. At exactly 10 o'clock, a bailiff opened the door to courtroom 3B and called their case number. Marcus's heart began to race as he followed James into the courtroom. It was smaller than he had expected, with dark wood paneling and fluorescent lights that cast everything in harsh, unflattering shadows. Judge Henderson was already seated behind the bench, a woman in her early 60s with steel-gray hair and intelligent eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses. She had a reputation for fairness and efficiency, qualities that Marcus supposed were essential in family court, where emotions ran high and people often behaved badly. Marcus took his seat at the plaintiff's table and looked around the courtroom. Elena's attorney, a sharp-looking woman named Rebecca Chun, was already seated at the defendant's table, shuffling through papers and checking her phone. But the chair next to her, where Elena should have been sitting, remained empty. "Where is she?" Marcus whispered to James. "I'm sure she'll be here," James whispered back. Traffic, maybe, or last-minute nerves. But as the minutes ticked by, Marcus began to feel a growing sense of unease. Elena was never late. In 12 years of marriage, she had never been late for anything important. She believed that punctuality was a sign of respect, both for others and for oneself. She would rather arrive 30 minutes early and wait than risk being even 5 minutes late. Judge Henderson looked up from her papers and frowned slightly. "Ms. Chun, where is your client?" Rebecca Chun stood up, looking somewhat flustered. "Your Honor, I spoke with Mrs. Williams yesterday evening, and she confirmed she would be here this morning. I'm not sure what might be keeping her." "Well, we can't proceed without her," the judge said firmly. "This is a dissolution of marriage, not a default judgment. Both parties must be present." Marcus felt his anxiety spike. What if Elena had changed her mind? What if she had decided at the last minute that she didn't want the divorce after all? Part of him hoped that might be true, but a larger part knew that their marriage was beyond repair. The damage had been done slowly, over months and years of small disappointments and growing resentments, until they had become strangers sharing the same address. "Should I try calling her?" James asked quietly. Marcus nodded, and James stepped out into the hallway to make the call. Through the courtroom's small window, Marcus could see him pacing back and forth, phone pressed to his ear. After several minutes, James returned, shaking his head. Straight to voicemail, he reported. Judge Henderson was beginning to look impatient. Ms. Chun, I'm going to give your client 15 more minutes. If she doesn't appear, we'll have to reschedule, and there will be additional court costs. Rebecca Chun was frantically typing on her phone, presumably sending urgent messages to Elena. Marcus could see the tension in her shoulders, the way she kept glancing at the door as if willing Elena to walk through it. The 15 minutes passed with agonizing slowness. Marcus found himself studying every detail of the courtroom, from the faded American flag in the corner to the motivational poster behind the judge's bench that read, "Justice is truth in action." He thought about all the couples who had sat in these same chairs, ending marriages that had once been full of hope and promise. Finally, Judge Henderson cleared her throat. "I'm afraid we're going to have to." The courtroom door opened with a soft creak, and Marcus turned expectantly, relief flooding through him. But the woman who walked through that door was not Elena. It was Sophia. Elena's younger sister looked almost exactly like her, with the same dark hair and olive skin, the same delicate features and graceful way of moving. But where Elena was always perfectly put together, Sophia looked disheveled and upset. Her usually immaculate hair was pulled back in a messy ponytail, and her eyes were red-rimmed as if she had been crying. Marcus felt his blood turn to ice. Sophia would never be here unless something was terribly wrong. She walked quickly down the aisle toward the front of the courtroom, her heels clicking on the polished floor. When she reached the defendant's table, she leaned down to whisper urgently in Rebecca Chen's ear. Marcus watched the lawyer's face change as she listened, her professional composure cracking to reveal shock and concern. Rebecca stood up slowly, her face pale. "Your Honor, I need to request an immediate recess. There's been an incident." Judge Henderson's frown deepened. "What kind of incident?" Rebecca glanced at Sophia, who nodded encouragingly, then looked directly at Marcus. Her voice was steady, but he could hear the tremor beneath the professional tone. "Your Honor, I've just been informed that Mrs. Elena Williams was involved in a serious automobile accident 3 days ago. She's currently in intensive care at St. Mary's Hospital." The words hit Marcus like a physical blow. The courtroom seemed to tilt around him, and he gripped the edge of the table to steady himself. Elena was in the hospital? In intensive care? How had he not known? Why hadn't anyone called him? But even as these questions raced through his mind, a darker thought was forming. 3 days ago. Elena had been in an accident 3 days ago, and he was only finding out now, in a courtroom, from her sister. Sophia was looking at him across the room, and in her eyes, he saw not just grief and fear, but something else. Something that made his stomach clench with dread. She knew something. Something she hadn't told the lawyer. Something she was saving for him. Judge Henderson was speaking, saying something about rescheduling and postponing proceedings, but Marcus couldn't hear her over the roaring in his ears. All he could think about was Elena, lying unconscious in a hospital bed, and Sophia's eyes, filled with the terrible knowledge that she was about to share. As the courtroom emptied around them, Sophia finally approached him. James had gone to speak with the judge's clerk about rescheduling, and Rebecca Chun was packing up her files. For a moment, it was just the two of them, Elena's estranged husband and her beloved sister, standing in the shadow of the dissolution that would now have to wait. "Marcus," Sophia said softly, her voice breaking slightly on his name. "How is she?" he asked, though he wasn't sure he wanted to hear the answer. Sophia's eyes filled with tears, and she took a shaky breath. It's bad, Marcus. The doctors say the next 48 hours will be critical." Marcus felt the world shift beneath his feet. Despite everything that had gone wrong between them, despite the anger and disappointment and hurt feelings, he had never imagined a world without Elena in it. Even divorced, even living separate lives, she would still exist somewhere, still be the woman who had shared his 20s and early 30s, still be the person who knew him better than anyone else ever had. "I need to see her," he said. Sophia nodded, fresh tears spilling down her cheeks. "Marcus, there's something else. Something I need to tell you before we go to the hospital." The way she said it made every nerve in his body tingle with alarm. What is it? Sophia glanced around the empty courtroom, then back at his face. When she spoke again, her voice was barely above a whisper, but each word hit him like a hammer blow. The accident wasn't really an accident. Elena tried to kill herself. The world went completely silent. Marcus could see Sophia's lips moving, could see the concern in her eyes, but he couldn't hear anything except the sound of his own heartbeat thundering in his ears. Elena had tried to take her own life. The woman he had lived with for 12 years, the woman he thought he knew better than anyone, had been in so much pain that she had wanted to die. And he had known nothing about it. Why? He managed to whisper. Sophia wiped her eyes with the back of her hand, smearing her makeup. There's something about the divorce, Marcus. Something she never told you. Something that changes everything. Marcus felt like he was drowning, gasping for air in a room that suddenly felt airless. What are you talking about? Sophia looked directly into his eyes, and he could see the weight of whatever secret she was carrying, the burden of knowledge that had brought her to this courthouse instead of her sister. She's been protecting you, Sophia said. For months, she's been protecting you from something that would have destroyed your life. And she couldn't live with keeping the secret anymore. The courtroom was completely empty now except for the two of them. Through the windows, Marcus could see the normal world continuing outside, people going about their daily lives, unaware that his entire reality was crumbling around him. Sophia, he said, his voice hoarse. What secret? But Sophia was already walking toward the door, her footsteps echoing in the empty room. Come on, she said without looking back. It's time you learn the truth about why Elena really wanted this divorce. Marcus followed her on unsteady legs, his mind reeling with questions and fears. As they walked through the courthouse hallway, past the security checkpoint, down the steps, and into the bright morning sunlight, he couldn't shake the feeling that he was walking away from one life and toward another, completely different one. The drive to St. Mary's Hospital should have taken 25 minutes, but Sophia drove with the cautious precision of someone who had already seen too much tragedy in 1 week. Marcus sat in the passenger seat of her silver Honda, his hands clenched in his lap, watching the familiar streets of their city blur past the window. Every traffic light seemed to last forever. Every turn felt deliberate and measured, as if Sophia were buying time before she had to deliver whatever devastating news she was carrying. Start talking, Marcus said when they were stopped at a red light 5 blocks from the courthouse. His voice sounded strange to his own ears, hollow and distant. I need to know what's going on. Sophia's knuckles were white as she gripped the steering wheel. She stared straight ahead at the intersection, even though the light was still red and there was no traffic coming from either direction. I don't know where to begin, she said quietly. Begin with why my wife tried to kill herself, and why I'm finding out about it from you in a courthouse instead of from the hospital 3 days ago. The light turned green, and Sophia accelerated slowly. The hospital called me because I'm listed as Elena's emergency contact. Marcus felt like he'd been punched in the stomach. I'm her husband, not on her insurance forms, not on her medical directives. She changed all of that 6 months ago, right after she moved out. Sophia's voice was careful, clinical, as if she were reciting facts to avoid dealing with the emotions behind them. Marcus tried to process this information, but it felt surreal. Elena had systematically removed him from every aspect of her life, even the bureaucratic ones. The woman who used to consult him about which brand of toothpaste to buy had made major medical decisions without even telling him. Why didn't you call me when it happened? Sophia was quiet for so long that Marcus thought she might not answer. They passed 3 more intersections before she spoke again. Because Elena made me promise not to. Because she was terrified of what you would think if you found out the truth. What truth, Sophia? Stop dancing around it, and just tell me. Sophia pulled into the parking lot of a small diner called Mel's Place and put the car in park. The neon sign flickered intermittently, and through the windows, Marcus could see the usual collection of morning customers. Construction workers grabbing coffee before their shifts, elderly regulars reading newspapers over eggs and toast, a few teenagers who probably should have been in school. We need to talk before we go to the hospital, Sophia said. Once we're there, everything changes. Once you see her, once you talk to the doctors, there's no going back. Marcus unbuckled his seatbelt and turned to face his sister-in-law fully. Sophia looked so much like Elena that it was almost painful to look at her directly. They had the same dark eyes, the same delicate bone structure, the same way of pressing their lips together when they were thinking hard about something difficult. But where Elena was always controlled and composed, Sophia wore her emotions openly. She had been crying on and off since she arrived at the courthouse, and her carefully applied makeup was now smeared and streaked. Her hands were shaking slightly as she reached into her purse for a tissue. Elena has been getting threatening letters, Sophia said finally. For 8 months. Someone has been stalking her, watching her, sending her photos of herself taken without her knowledge. Pictures of her leaving work, pictures of her at the grocery store, pictures of her in her apartment. Marcus felt the blood drain from his face. What? Why didn't she call the police? She did. She filed reports. She gave them copies of the letters. She showed them the photos. They said there wasn't much they could do unless the person actually threatened physical harm or tried to make contact directly. But the photos, the stalking, technically not illegal if they're taken in public places. And the letters never explicitly threatened violence. They were disturbing, but not criminal. Marcus ran his hands through his hair, trying to make sense of what he was hearing. Why didn't she tell me? Even after we separated, why didn't she come to me? Sophia looked out the window at the diner, watching an elderly man in overalls slowly make his way to his truck with a styrofoam cup of coffee. When she spoke again, her voice was barely audible. Because she thought it was your fault. The words hung in the air between them like a toxic cloud. Marcus felt his entire worldview shifting, realigning itself around this new and terrible information. My fault? How could it be my fault? The letters started coming right after you filed for divorce. At first, Elena thought it was just a coincidence. But then, the person writing them started mentioning details about your marriage, about your arguments, about private conversations you and Elena had. Marcus felt sick. What kind of details? Things that only someone very close to you could have known. The fight you had about having children. The night Elena threw her wedding ring at you after you forgot your anniversary. The fact that you'd been sleeping in the guest room for 6 months before she moved out. Each revelation felt like another nail being driven into his chest. These were their most private moments, their deepest pains, being used as weapons against Elena by some stranger who somehow knew their intimate secrets. I don't understand, Marcus said. How could someone know all of that? Sophia finally looked directly at him, and in her eyes, he saw something that made his blood run cold. It wasn't just fear or sadness. It was accusation. Elena hired a private investigator, Sophia said. She wanted to make sure you weren't hiding any assets before the divorce was finalized. Marcus felt a flash of anger. She what? She had me investigated? Don't get indignant about it, Marcus. It's actually pretty common in divorce cases. Rebecca Chun recommended it, especially since Elena was waiving alimony and wanted to make sure she wasn't getting screwed over. The anger faded as quickly as it had come, replaced by confusion. Okay, so she had me investigated. What does that have to do with the stalking? The private investigator she hired was named Derek Hoffman. He came highly recommended, had been in business for 15 years, had a good reputation with several law firms in the city. Marcus waited for Sophia to continue, but she seemed to be steeling herself for something particularly difficult. 2 weeks after Elena hired him, Derek Hoffman disappeared. Disappeared? Vanished. His office was cleaned out overnight. His phone was disconnected. His website went dark. Elena tried to contact him to get a status update on his investigation, and it was like he had never existed. Marcus was having trouble following the thread of the story. I still don't understand what this has to do with. The first letter arrived the next day, Sophia interrupted. And it was written on Derek Hoffman's letterhead. The pieces began clicking together in Marcus's mind, forming a picture so disturbing that he almost couldn't accept it. You're saying this private investigator, Derek Hoffman, was not a licensed private investigator, Sophia said. Elena found out later that he was a con artist who had been using that identity for only a few months. His real name is Derek Hutchinson, and he has a criminal record going back 20 years. Fraud, identity theft, stalking, harassment. Elena hired a predator to investigate her own husband. Marcus felt like the ground was falling away beneath him. The man Elena had trusted with their most personal information, their financial records, their private lives, was a career criminal who had used that access to begin a campaign of psychological torture against her. But why? Marcus asked. What did he want? At first, Elena thought he wanted money. But he never asked for any. He just kept sending letters, describing her daily routines, commenting on her choices, making suggestions about how she could improve her life. Sophia pulled another tissue from her purse and wiped her eyes. The letters started getting more personal, more invasive. He knew what she ate for breakfast, what time she went to bed, what she watched on television. He knew when she cried. Marcus. He described the nights when she cried herself to sleep missing you. Marcus felt tears stinging his own eyes. The image of Elena alone in her apartment, being watched by this monster while she grieved for their failed marriage, was almost unbearable. She was terrified, Sophia continued. But she was also ashamed. She felt like it was her fault for hiring him in the first place. She felt like she had brought this on herself by not trusting you enough. She could have told me, Marcus said. We could have figured this out together. Could you have? Really? Sophia's voice was sharper now, cutting through his self-pity. You two could barely have a civil conversation about dividing up your furniture. You think you could have worked together to deal with a stalker? Marcus wanted to argue, but he knew she was right. The last few months of their marriage had been toxic, filled with bitter arguments and cold silences. They had been so focused on hurting each other that they had lost the ability to function as a team. So she handled it alone, he said quietly. She tried to. She changed her phone number. She moved to a different apartment. She varied her routines. But he always found her. The letters kept coming, and they were getting worse. Sophia reached into her purse and pulled out a manila envelope. These are copies of some of the letters. Elena gave them to me last month, when she was getting desperate. She made me promise to show them to you, if anything happened to her. Marcus took the envelope with shaking hands. The weight of it seemed to contain the entire weight of Elena's suffering. How bad are they? Bad enough that Elena stopped eating. Bad enough that she stopped sleeping. Bad enough that she started talking about disappearing entirely, changing her name, and moving to another state where he couldn't find her. Marcus opened the envelope and pulled out several sheets of paper. The letterhead was professional-looking, with Hoffman Investigations printed in elegant script across the top. But the content below was anything but professional. The first letter was dated 6 months ago, just a few weeks after Elena had moved out of their house. Dear Elena, I hope you don't mind me writing to you directly. I know our professional relationship has ended, but I feel like we developed a connection during my investigation that I don't want to lose. You seem like such a lonely person, going through this difficult time in your life. I couldn't help but notice how sad you looked yesterday when you were eating lunch by yourself at that little cafe on 5th Street. The tuna sandwich, if I'm not mistaken. You only ate half of it. Asterisk, I want you to know that you don't have to be alone. I'm still watching over you, making sure you're safe. I saw that man who was bothering you outside your office building last Tuesday. Don't worry, I made sure he won't bother you again. Asterisk, you looked beautiful in that blue dress, by the way. It brings out your eyes. Asterisk, your friend, Derek. Asterisk, Marcus felt nauseated. The tone was familiar and possessive, like a letter from a concerned boyfriend rather than a professional correspondence. And the details, what Elena ate for lunch, what she wore, who she interacted with, showed a level of surveillance that was deeply disturbing. The second letter was worse. Dear Elena, I noticed you've been having trouble sleeping. I can see your bedroom light on at all hours of the night. You really should get better curtains. Those sheer ones don't provide much privacy. I worry about you staying up so late, staring at your phone. Are you thinking about Marcus? You deserve so much better than him. Asterisk, I've been doing some additional research on your husband, ex-husband soon, I hope. Did you know he's been visiting that bar on Maple Street every Friday after work? He sits alone and drinks beer and watches the game. Sometimes he talks to the bartender, a young woman named Jessica. She's pretty, but not as pretty as you. I don't think you have anything to worry about, but I'm keeping an eye on the situation for you. Asterisk, I left you a small gift on your car windshield this morning. I hope you like daisies. Asterisk, all my love. Derek. Asterisk, Marcus's hands were shaking so hard he could barely hold the paper. This man had been watching both of them, tracking their movements, inserting himself into the most private aspects of their divorce. And Elena had been living with this knowledge alone, too ashamed and frightened to ask for help. There are more. Sophia said quietly. Dozens of them. They get progressively worse. Marcus couldn't bring himself to read anymore. The violation was too complete, too intimate. This stranger had known more about Elena's daily life than Marcus did, had been a constant presence in her world while Marcus was focused on his own anger and resentment about their failing marriage. Why didn't she get a restraining order? She tried. But Derek Hoffman doesn't exist on paper. The police couldn't find any record of him under that name, couldn't locate an address or a legitimate business license. Elena's lawyer said it would be almost impossible to serve a restraining order on someone who was effectively a ghost. Marcus put the letters back in the envelope, unable to look at them any longer. So what happened? Why did she try to? He couldn't bring himself to say the words. Sophia's voice broke as she answered. Last week, the letters stopped coming. Stopped? That's good, right? That's what Elena thought at first. She was so relieved. She thought maybe he had gotten bored, or found someone else to fixate on. Or maybe the police had finally tracked him down. Sophia wiped her eyes again, smearing her mascara further. But then she got a package. Marcus felt his stomach clench. What kind of package? Photos. Hundreds of them. Pictures of her going back months, from before the letters even started. Pictures of her inside her apartment, sleeping, showering, changing clothes. Pictures of her crying. Pictures of her looking at her phone, probably reading his letters. Marcus felt rage building inside him like a physical force. The thought of this predator violating Elena so completely, documenting her most vulnerable moments, was almost unbearable. But that wasn't the worst part, Sophia continued. The worst part was what else was in the package. Marcus didn't want to hear more, but he knew he had to. What else? Pictures of you, Marcus. Pictures of you taken during the same time period. Pictures of you leaving the house. Pictures of you at work. Pictures of you at that bar he mentioned in his letters. The implication hit Marcus like a sledgehammer. He was watching both of us. For months. The entire time Elena thought she was protecting you by keeping this secret, he was already targeting you too. And there was a note with the photos. Sophia reached into the envelope and pulled out one more piece of paper. This one was handwritten, not typed on letterhead. Elena, now you understand the situation completely. I have been documenting both of your lives for quite some time. I have videos, photos, recorded conversations, financial records, everything. If you don't want this information to become public, if you don't want Marcus to learn exactly how much I know about both of you, you will do exactly what I tell you to do. Meet me at the warehouse on Dock Street tomorrow night at 11 p.m. Come alone. Don't bring your phone. Don't tell anyone where you're going. Don't contact the police. If you don't show up, I will mail copies of everything to Marcus, to your family, to your employer, and to every person in your contact list. Your private life will become public entertainment. This is the last letter you'll receive from me. After tomorrow night, everything changes. Derek Marcus stared at the note until the words began to blur together. Elena had received this ultimatum, this threat to expose their most private moments to the world, and she had faced it alone. She didn't go, Sophia said. She was too scared. She thought about it, but she couldn't bring herself to meet him. Good. She shouldn't have gone. But she couldn't live with the alternative either. She spent 3 days knowing that he was going to destroy both of your lives, that he was going to humiliate you in ways you couldn't even imagine. She couldn't eat, couldn't sleep, couldn't function. Marcus was beginning to understand the depth of Elena's desperation. She had been trapped between two impossible choices: face a dangerous predator alone or watch helplessly as he destroyed everyone she cared about. So she decided to take a third option, Sophia said quietly. Marcus closed his eyes, finally understanding. Elena had seen suicide not as an escape from her own pain, but as a way to protect him. If she was dead, Derek Hutchinson would have no leverage over her, no reason to follow through on his threats. She had tried to die to save him. The weight of that realization was crushing. While Marcus had been angry about their failed marriage, while he had been focused on dividing their property and moving on with his life, Elena had been planning to sacrifice herself to protect him from a threat he didn't even know existed. The accident, Marcus said. Tell me about the accident. Sophia started the car again, and they pulled back onto the road toward the hospital. She drove her car into a tree on River Road, 3 miles outside the city limits. The police said there were no skid marks, no signs that she tried to brake or avoid the collision. Marcus knew River Road. It was a winding country route that Elena sometimes took when she wanted to think, a peaceful drive through farmland and forest that she found calming. The irony of her choosing such a beautiful, serene place for such a desperate act was almost unbearable. "How bad is it?" he asked. "2 broken ribs, a punctured lung, internal bleeding, and a severe head injury. She's been unconscious since the accident. The doctors say the next day or 2 will determine whether she—" Sophia couldn't finish the sentence, but she didn't need to. Marcus understood. Elena might not survive her attempt to save him. As they pulled into the hospital parking lot, Marcus saw the imposing brick building where Elena was fighting for her life. Somewhere inside those walls, connected to machines and monitors, was the woman who had been willing to die rather than let him be hurt by a stranger's cruelty. The woman he had been planning to divorce this morning was the same woman who had been protecting him all along. And now he had to face the possibility that he might lose her forever, not to divorce papers and legal proceedings, but to the profound love that had driven her to such desperate measures. St. Mary's Hospital smelled like antiseptic and coffee, a combination that Marcus would forever associate with the worst day of his life. The intensive care unit was on the 7th floor, accessible only through a security door that required special permission to enter. Sophia had to show her identification and explain their relationship to Elena before a tired-looking nurse would even consider letting Marcus inside. "I'm her husband," Marcus said when the nurse hesitated. The nurse, a middle-aged woman with graying hair pulled back in a practical ponytail, consulted her computer screen. "I'm sorry, Mr. Williams, but you're not listed as an emergency contact. Hospital policy requires—" "Please," Marcus interrupted, his voice breaking slightly. "I know we're getting divorced, but I need to see her. I just found out about the accident." The nurse looked at him with sympathy, then at Sophia, who nodded encouragingly. "I'll make an exception this time," she said softly. "But you'll need to speak with the social worker about updating her emergency contact information if you want to be involved in her care decisions." Marcus followed Sophia through the security door and down a hallway lined with identical rooms. Each room contained someone's crisis, someone's worst nightmare playing out in slow motion. Through partially open doors, he caught glimpses of other families maintaining their own vigils, other lives hanging in the balance. Elena's room was the third one on the left. Sophia paused outside the door, her hand on the handle, and looked at Marcus with concern. "Are you ready for this?" she asked. Marcus nodded, though he wasn't sure he would ever be ready to see Elena like this. Nothing could have prepared him for the reality of walking into that room. Elena looked impossibly small in the hospital bed, dwarfed by the machines surrounding her. A ventilator breathed for her with mechanical precision, its rhythmic whoosh the only sound in the room besides the steady beeping of monitors. Her face was bruised and swollen, almost unrecognizable except for her hair, still dark and beautiful despite everything that had happened. Tubes snaked from her arms and chest, connecting her to bags of fluid and medication that hung from metal poles like transparent fruit. Her left arm was in a cast, and Marcus could see the edge of bandages wrapped around her torso beneath the hospital gown. But it was the stillness that affected him most. Elena had always been in motion, always gesturing with her hands when she talked, always shifting positions, always alive with energy. Now she lay perfectly still except for the artificial rise and fall of her chest, and the absence of her natural animation made her look like a stranger. Marcus approached the bed slowly, as if sudden movements might disturb the delicate balance keeping her alive. A chair had been positioned next to the bed, probably where Sophia had been sitting during her vigils over the past 3 days. "Has she been conscious at all?" Marcus asked. Sophia shook her head. "Not since the accident. The doctors say it's partially due to the medications they're giving her, but mostly it's from the head injury. There's swelling in her brain that needs to go down before she can wake up." Marcus reached out tentatively and touched Elena's hand where it lay on top of the blanket. Her skin felt cool and papery, nothing like the warm, soft hands he remembered. Her wedding ring was gone, probably removed by the emergency room staff, leaving only a pale band of skin where it had rested for 12 years. "What do the doctors say about her chances?" Dr. Martinez is her primary physician. He's been honest with us about the severity of her injuries, but he's also cautiously optimistic. The internal bleeding has stopped, and the lung is healing well. The main concern now is the brain swelling. Marcus pulled the chair closer to the bed and sat down, still holding Elena's hand. It felt surreal to be touching her again after months of careful distance, months of avoiding any physical contact that might complicate their already difficult separation. "Sophia," he said without looking away from Elena's face, "there's something I need to ask you." "What is it?" Did Elena really want this divorce? Or was she just trying to protect me from Derek Hutchinson? Sophia was quiet for a long moment, and when Marcus looked up at her, he could see her struggling with how much to reveal. "That's complicated," she said finally. "I need to know. Was our marriage over before this stalking started, or did she push me away because she was scared?" Sophia moved to the small window that looked out over the hospital parking lot. From 7 floors up, the cars looked like toys, and the people walking between them looked like dolls. "Elena has been unhappy for a long time, Marcus. You both have. The problems in your marriage were real. This stalking situation didn't create them." Marcus felt a familiar pang of disappointment, though he wasn't sure what answer he had been hoping for. "But," Sophia continued, "the way she handled those problems, the way she shut you out and pushed for such a quick, clean divorce, that was all about protecting you from Derek." Marcus looked back at Elena's still form, trying to reconcile the woman he thought he knew with the woman who had been carrying such a terrible burden alone. "She started getting the letters right after you filed the initial paperwork," Sophia explained. "At first, she thought they were just a weird coincidence. But when Derek started including details about your private conversations, your arguments, even things that happened in your bedroom, she realized he had been watching both of you for much longer than she initially hired him. So she decided to speed up the divorce process. She thought that if you two were officially divorced, if you had no legal connection to each other, Derek would lose interest in you. She figured he was fixated on the drama of your failing marriage, and if that drama was resolved, he would focus only on her." Marcus felt sick thinking about Elena making these calculations, trying to protect him while he remained completely oblivious to the danger. "She also thought," Sophia continued, "that if something happened to her, if Derek escalated to physical violence, you would be safe if you were legally separated from her. No shared assets, no legal liability, no reason for him to involve you in whatever he was planning. So she was willing to sacrifice our marriage to save my life. She was willing to sacrifice everything to save your life." The weight of that statement settled over Marcus like a heavy blanket. Elena had given up their 12-year relationship, had endured his anger and resentment about the divorce, had let him believe she no longer loved him, all to keep him safe from a threat he hadn't known existed. "Why didn't she trust me enough to tell me?" Marcus asked. "Did she really think I was so weak that I couldn't handle this?" Sophia turned back from the window and looked at him directly. "She didn't think you were weak, Marcus. She thought you were good." "What do you mean? You've never been in a situation like this. You've never dealt with someone who was truly dangerous, truly unpredictable." Elena was terrified that if you knew about Derek, you would try to confront him. You would want to protect her, and you would put yourself at risk. Marcus wanted to argue, but he knew Sophia was probably right. If he had known about the stalking, he would have wanted to track down Derek Hutchinson and make him pay for terrorizing Elena. He would have been angry and protective and probably reckless. She knew you, Marcus. She knew that you wouldn't be able to just sit back and let someone hurt her, even if she was trying to leave you. She knew you would want to be the hero. A soft knock on the door interrupted their conversation. A man in scrubs entered the room, carrying a tablet and wearing the confident expression of someone who dealt with medical crises every day. "Ms. Morales?" he said to Sophia. "I'm Dr. Martinez. We spoke yesterday about Elena's condition." Sophia introduced Marcus as Elena's husband, and Dr. Martinez shook his hand with professional sympathy. "How is she doing?" Marcus asked. "Her vital signs have been stable since yesterday afternoon, which is encouraging. The internal injuries are healing well, and we've been able to reduce some of the medications that were keeping her sedated." Marcus felt a flicker of hope. Does that mean she might wake up soon? It's possible. Brain injuries are unpredictable, but the swelling has gone down significantly in the past 24 hours. We're cautiously optimistic. Dr. Martinez consulted his tablet, scrolling through what Marcus assumed were Elena's medical records. I do need to discuss something with you both, though. Elena is going to need extensive support when she wakes up. The head injury may have affected her memory, her cognitive function, her emotional regulation. Recovery could take months or even years. What does that mean exactly? Sophia asked. She may not remember the accident. She may not remember the events leading up to it. In some cases, patients lose weeks or even months of memories prior to a traumatic brain injury. Marcus felt a complex mix of relief and concern. If Elena didn't remember Derek Hutchinson's threats, she would be spared the psychological trauma of reliving that experience. But she also might not remember their final arguments, the legal proceedings, the fact that they had been planning to finalize their divorce that very morning. There's also the possibility of personality changes, Dr. Martinez continued. Brain injuries can affect impulse control, emotional stability, decision-making abilities. The Elena who wakes up may not be exactly the same as the Elena who was brought in 3 days ago. But she will wake up? Marcus asked. We believe so, yes. But I want to prepare you for the fact that recovery is going to be a long process, and she's going to need people who care about her to help her through it. After Dr. Martinez left, Marcus and Sophia sat in silence for a while, both lost in their own thoughts. The afternoon sun slanted through the window, casting long shadows across Elena's still form. Marcus found himself thinking about their early years together, when they had been so happy, so confident in their love for each other. They had met at a bookstore where Elena was working part-time while finishing her marketing degree. Marcus had been browsing the philosophy section, pretending to understand Nietzsche, when Elena had approached him with a smile and recommended something more accessible. Try this instead, she had said, pulling a book by Alan Watts from the shelf. Same big ideas, but he actually explains them in a way that makes sense. Marcus had been charmed by her directness, her willingness to puncture his pretensions with such gentle humor. They had ended up talking for 2 hours while Elena was supposed to be working, ranging from philosophy to movies to their shared love of terrible reality television. Their first date had been at a small Italian restaurant where they had talked until the staff started stacking chairs around them. Their second date had been a long walk through the city, discovering hidden parks and quirky neighborhoods. By their third date, Marcus had known he was falling in love with her. Elena had been different then, more open, more spontaneous, more willing to share her thoughts and dreams. She had talked about starting her own marketing firm someday, about traveling to places where she could practice her college Spanish, about the house they would live in, and the garden she would plant. Marcus had loved her ambition, her energy, the way she attacked challenges with determination and creativity. She had made him want to be better, to work harder, to dream bigger. Under her influence, he had finally finished his degree, gotten a better job, started taking better care of himself. But somewhere along the way, they had started growing apart instead of growing together. Elena's career had taken off, consuming more and more of her time and attention. Marcus had felt left behind, uncertain about his own direction, resentful of the success that seemed to come so easily to her. They had stopped talking about their dreams and started talking about logistics. Who would pick up groceries? Who would pay which bills? Who would deal with the broken dishwasher? The big conversations had been replaced by small irritations, and the small irritations had accumulated into larger resentments. The worst part was that Marcus couldn't pinpoint exactly when it had started going wrong. There had been no single catastrophic event, no affair or betrayal or dramatic argument. Instead, their marriage had died slowly from neglect and misunderstanding and the gradual erosion of intimacy. Now, sitting beside Elena's hospital bed, Marcus wondered how much of their problems had been real and how much had been amplified by the stress of being stalked by a dangerous predator. Had Derek Hutchinson's surveillance and harassment pushed Elena to withdraw from their marriage as a protective mechanism? Had her fear of involving Marcus in her ordeal caused her to become distant and secretive? Marcus. Sophia's voice interrupted his thoughts. Yeah. There's something else I need to tell you about Derek Hutchinson. Marcus felt his stomach clench. He wasn't sure he could handle any more revelations. The police called me yesterday. They've been investigating the case since Elena gave them copies of the letters, and they've made some progress. Did they find him? Not exactly. But they found Derek Hutchinson, the real Derek Hutchinson. Marcus frowned. What do you mean, the real one? The man who was stalking Elena stole the identity of an actual private investigator named Derek Hutchinson who died in a car accident 2 years ago. The real Derek Hutchinson was a legitimate businessman with no criminal record. So who is this guy? Sophia pulled a folded piece of paper from her purse. The police think his real name is Daniel Hoffman. He has a criminal history going back 15 years, identity theft, credit card fraud, stalking, harassment. He's been using different fake identities to run various cons. Marcus took the paper and unfolded it. It was a police mugshot of a man in his 40s with thinning brown hair and pale, unremarkable features. He looked like someone you would pass on the street without a second glance, which probably made him effective at surveillance. The police think he's been operating in this area for at least 6 months, probably longer. Elena wasn't his first victim. There were others? 3 other women that they know of. All of them hired him for various investigative services, and all of them ended up being stalked and harassed when they tried to end their professional relationship with him. Marcus stared at the mugshot, trying to understand the kind of person who would dedicate his life to terrorizing innocent people. What happened to the other women? One moved out of state. One got a restraining order that was eventually effective because she had a real name to put on the paperwork. The third one. Sophia paused. What happened to the third one? She's in a psychiatric facility. She had a complete breakdown after months of harassment. She's been there for 8 months. Marcus felt rage building inside him like a physical force. This monster had destroyed lives methodically, deliberately, for no apparent reason other than the power it gave him over his victims. Do they know where he is now? They're still looking for him. But, Marcus, there's something else. Something the detective told me that I need you to know. Marcus braced himself for another devastating revelation. Daniel Hoffman wasn't working alone, Sophia said quietly. They think he had an accomplice, someone who helped him with the surveillance and the identity theft. Who? They don't know yet. But the detective said that the level of information he had about you and Elena suggests that someone close to one of you was feeding him details about your private life. Marcus felt the room spinning around him. The idea that someone in their circle of friends or family had betrayed them to this predator was almost incomprehensible. Someone we know? Someone who knew intimate details about your marriage, your arguments, your routines. Someone who had access to your personal information. Marcus tried to think of who could have known the SP. Elena opened her eyes on a Tuesday morning at 6:47 a.m., exactly 4 days after Marcus had learned the truth about their marriage. The nurse who witnessed her awakening later said it was like watching someone surface from deep water, slow, disoriented, and gasping for something essential that had been missing. Marcus was asleep in the uncomfortable chair beside her bed when it happened. He had been maintaining an almost constant vigil since leaving the courthouse, going home only to shower and change clothes before returning to the hospital. Sophia had tried to convince him to get a proper night's sleep in his own bed, but Marcus couldn't bring himself to leave for more than a few hours at a time. The sound that woke him wasn't dramatic, just a soft, confused moan as Elena tried to speak around the ventilator tube. Marcus's eyes snapped open, and, for a moment, he thought he might be dreaming. But then Elena's eyes moved, focusing on his face with difficulty, and he knew she was really awake. "Elena," he whispered, reaching for the call button. "Elena, can you hear me?" Her eyes were glassy and unfocused, but they tracked his movement as he stood up. She tried to speak again, but the breathing tube prevented any sound except for a distressed whimper. Marcus could see panic beginning to build in her expression as she became aware of the tubes and machines surrounding her. The nurse arrived within seconds, followed quickly by Dr. Martinez. The next 30 minutes were a blur of medical procedures as they removed the ventilator and checked Elena's vital signs. Marcus was pushed back against the wall, watching helplessly as the medical team worked. When they finally allowed him to approach the bed again, Elena was breathing on her own, though her voice was hoarse and weak from the breathing tube. "Water," she whispered, her first word in 4 days. The nurse gave her ice chips instead, explaining that her throat needed time to heal. Elena sucked on them gratefully, her eyes moving around the room as if trying to piece together where she was and why. "Elena," Marcus said softly, pulling his chair close to the bed. How do you feel? She looked at him with confusion, as if she were trying to place his face. Marcus? What? Why am I in the hospital? Dr. Martinez stepped forward. Elena, you were in a car accident 4 days ago. You've been unconscious since then. Do you remember anything about what happened? Elena's brow furrowed as she tried to think. Marcus watched her face carefully, wondering what memories were still intact, and which ones might be lost forever. I remember driving, she said slowly. It was dark. I was upset about something, but I can't. What was I upset about? Dr. Martinez exchanged a glance with Marcus. What's the last thing you remember clearly? Elena was quiet for a long moment, her eyes closing as she concentrated. We had a fight, she said finally, looking at Marcus. You were angry about something. We were in the kitchen, and you threw your coffee mug in the sink so hard that it broke. Marcus felt his heart sink. That argument had happened 3 months ago, long before Elena had hired Derek Hutchinson, long before the stalking had begun. She had lost months of memories, including everything related to Derek's campaign of harassment. Do you remember moving out? Marcus asked gently. Elena's eyes widened with confusion and distress. Moving out? Did I move out? Dr. Martinez intervened. Elena, it's very common for patients with head injuries to have some memory loss. The memories may come back gradually, or they may not. Right now, the important thing is that you're awake, and your cognitive function appears to be intact. But Elena was still focused on Marcus, her expression becoming increasingly agitated. Why would I have moved out? Are we getting divorced? Marcus looked helplessly at Dr. Martinez, unsure how much to explain while Elena was still in such a fragile state. The doctor seemed to understand his dilemma. Elena, you've been through a significant trauma. I think it would be best if we focus on your physical recovery first. These other questions can be addressed gradually as you get stronger. But Elena wasn't going to be put off so easily. Despite her physical weakness, Marcus could see the determination in her eyes that he recognized from 12 years of marriage. When Elena wanted answers, she didn't give up until she got them. Marcus, she said, reaching for his hand. Tell me what's been happening. Why can't I remember the last few months? Marcus took her hand carefully, mindful of the 4 lines and monitoring equipment. Her skin was warmer now than it had been during the days she was unconscious, and her grip was surprisingly strong. It's complicated, Marcus said. There's a lot that's happened, and I think we should wait until you're feeling stronger. I'm strong enough, Elena insisted, though her voice was still weak. Please, I need to know. Marcus looked at Dr. Martinez, who nodded reluctantly. Keep it simple for now, the doctor advised. Don't overwhelm her with too much information at once. Marcus took a deep breath. We were having problems in our marriage. Big problems. You moved out 6 months ago, and we filed for divorce. Elena's face crumpled as if he had struck her. Divorce? But why? What happened between us? We grew apart. We stopped communicating, stopped supporting each other. We both made mistakes. Elena was crying now, tears streaming down her bruised face. I don't remember any of that. The last thing I remember clearly is loving you. Marcus felt his own eyes filling with tears. The irony was almost unbearable. Elena had lost the memories of their marriage falling apart, but she had also lost the memories of discovering why it had fallen apart. Elena, he said carefully, there were other factors involved. Things that you were dealing with that I didn't know about at the time. What kind of things? Marcus glanced at Dr. Martinez again, unsure how much Elena could handle. But the doctor had moved to the window and was giving them privacy to have this difficult conversation. Someone was stalking you, Marcus said quietly. A man you had hired for some work related to the divorce. He was sending you threatening letters, taking photos of you without your permission, making your life miserable. Elena stared at him blankly. I don't remember any of that. The doctors think the memory loss might be related to the trauma. Your brain might be protecting you from remembering something that was very frightening and stressful. Elena was quiet for a long time, processing this information. Is that why I was driving that night? Was I running from this stalker? Marcus hesitated. Sophia had made him promise not to tell Elena about the suicide attempt unless she asked directly. The doctors thought it would be better for her psychological recovery if she didn't know that she had deliberately driven into that tree. You were upset, Marcus said carefully. You were dealing with a lot of stress. But Elena was studying his face with the intensity he remembered from their early relationship, when she could read his thoughts just by looking at his expressions. "Marcus," she said quietly, "did I try to kill myself?" The directness of the question caught him off guard. Marcus tried to maintain a neutral expression, but Elena knew him too well. "You did, didn't you?" she said, and fresh tears began streaming down her face. "I tried to kill myself, and I don't even remember why." Marcus squeezed her hand. "Elena, you were in an impossible situation. You were trying to protect me from this stalker, trying to handle everything alone. You felt trapped. But suicide?" Elena's voice was filled with horror. How could I have thought that was the answer? Marcus didn't know how to explain the level of desperation that Derek Hutchinson's threats had driven Elena to. How could he make her understand the fear and shame and helplessness she had felt when she didn't remember any of it herself? "The important thing is that you survived," he said. "You're going to be okay, and we're going to figure out how to move forward from here." Elena closed her eyes, and Marcus could see her struggling to absorb everything he had told her. When she opened them again, there was a clarity in her gaze that hadn't been there before. "Are we still getting divorced?" Marcus realized that he didn't know the answer to that question. Everything had changed since he learned about Derek Hutchinson, since he understood why Elena had pushed him away. But he also knew that their marriage had real problems that existed independent of the stalking situation. "I don't know," he said honestly. "A lot has happened. A lot has changed. Do you still love me?" The question hung in the air between them like a bridge that Marcus wasn't sure he was ready to cross. Did he still love her? He had been so angry for so long, so hurt by what he perceived as her betrayal, that he had convinced himself that his feelings for her had died. But sitting here, holding her hand, seeing her so vulnerable and confused, he realized that his love for Elena had never actually disappeared. It had just been buried under layers of resentment and misunderstanding. "Yes," he said quietly, "I still love you." Elena smiled through her tears. "I love you too. I know I don't remember everything that went wrong between us, but I remember loving you." "Elena," Marcus said gently, "I need you to know that the man who was stalking you is still out there. The police are looking for him, but he hasn't been caught yet." Elena's expression grew serious. "Do you think he'll try to hurt me again?" "I don't know, but I'm going to make sure you're protected. I'm going to make sure this never happens again." Over the next few hours, as Elena grew stronger and more alert, Marcus and Sophia gradually filled in more details about what had happened during her lost months. They told her about Derek Hutchinson's letters, about his surveillance, about the photos he had taken. They explained how she had tried to protect Marcus by pushing him away, and how the stress of the situation had ultimately led to her suicide attempt. Elena listened to it all with growing horror and disbelief. It was like being told about someone else's life, a nightmare that had happened to a stranger who just happened to share her name and face. "I feel like I've lost part of myself," she said when they were finished. "Those months, all that pain and fear, it's just gone. I don't know if that's a blessing or a curse." "Maybe it's both," Sophia suggested. "Maybe your brain is giving you a chance to start over, to approach this situation from a different perspective." Detective Reynolds arrived that afternoon to interview Elena about her experiences with Derek Hutchinson. The detective was a kind woman in her 40s who specialized in stalking cases and had been working on Elena's case since the police received copies of the threatening letters. "I know this is difficult," Detective Reynolds said, settling into a chair across from Elena's bed. "But anything you can remember about your interactions with Derek Hutchinson could be helpful in tracking him down." Elena tried her best to answer the detective's questions, but her memory of the stalking period remained completely blank. She couldn't remember hiring Derek, couldn't remember receiving his letters, couldn't remember the fear that had dominated her life for months. "What about his accomplice?" Detective Reynolds asked. "We believe someone close to you was providing Derek with personal information about your marriage. Can you think of anyone who might have had access to intimate details about your relationship with Marcus?" Elena looked confused. "An accomplice? Someone we know was helping him." Marcus explained what the police had discovered about the inside information Derek had possessed. Elena's face went pale as she considered the implications. "You mean someone we trusted was betraying us?" "It looks that way," Detective Reynolds said. "We need to go through your social circles systematically. Friends, family members, co-workers, neighbors, anyone who might have known details about your arguments, your routines, your personal problems. Elena and Marcus spent the next hour going through lists of people who had been part of their lives during the period when Derek was gathering information. The process was exhausting and demoralizing, as every name forced them to consider whether that person might have betrayed them. Their best friends, Tom and Sarah, who had been having marriage problems of their own and might have resented Marcus and Elena's apparent stability. Elena's co-worker Janet, who had always seemed a little too interested in Elena's personal life. Marcus's brother David, who had never liked Elena and had been encouraging Marcus to end the marriage for years. "This is horrible," Elena said after they had gone through dozens of names. "How can we trust anyone ever again?" "We'll figure it out," Marcus promised. "We'll find out who did this, and we'll make sure they face consequences." Detective Reynolds gathered her notes and prepared to leave. "I'll keep you updated on our progress," she said. "In the meantime, I want you both to be very careful. Daniel Hoffman is still out there, and he may try to re-establish contact." After the detective left, Elena was exhausted from the emotional strain of the interview. Marcus helped her settle back into bed and adjusted her pillows. "Marcus," she said as he was about to sit back down, "I know I don't remember everything that went wrong between us, but I want to try to make this work. I want to try to save our marriage." Marcus felt a complex mix of hope and uncertainty. He wanted to believe they could rebuild what they had lost, but he also knew that the problems in their marriage hadn't all been caused by Derek Hutchinson's interference. "I want that too," he said, "but it's going to be complicated. We're going to have to work through a lot of things. I know, and I know it's not fair that I don't remember the reasons we grew apart, but maybe that could be an advantage. Maybe we can start fresh, without all the accumulated resentment and hurt feelings." Marcus squeezed her hand. "Maybe we can." 2 weeks after Elena woke up, Marcus got the call that would change everything once again. He was in the hospital cafeteria, picking at a sandwich and trying to work up the energy for another day of physical therapy sessions and medical consultations, when his phone rang. "Mr. Williams? This is Detective Reynolds. We need to meet immediately. We've arrested Daniel Hoffman, and he's provided some information that you and Elena need to hear." Marcus felt his pulse quicken. "You caught him? Where was he? I'd rather discuss this in person. Are you at the hospital?" "Yes. Elena's doing physical therapy right now. I'm on my way. Don't mention this to Elena yet. What I have to tell you both is going to be very difficult to hear." Marcus spent the next 20 minutes pacing the hallway outside the physical therapy room, his mind racing with possibilities. Had Derek Hutchinson been planning another attack? Had he been targeting other victims? And what information could he have provided that Detective Reynolds was so reluctant to discuss over the phone? Elena emerged from her therapy session looking tired but determined. Her mobility had improved dramatically over that night. As Elena slept peacefully for the first time in days, Marcus sat in the chair beside her bed and thought about everything that had changed since he walked into that courtroom expecting to finalize his divorce. He had learned that the woman he thought had stopped loving him had actually been willing to die to protect him. He had discovered that their marriage had been undermined by forces beyond their control. But he had also been reminded of why he had fallen in love with Elena in the first place: her strength, her determination, her capacity for sacrifice. The woman sleeping beside him was the same woman who had recommended philosophy books to a pretentious college student in a bookstore 12 years ago. She was the same woman who had made him want to be better than he was. The stalker was still out there. The accomplice remained unidentified. Elena's recovery would be long and difficult. Their marriage would require work and patience and forgiveness from both sides. But for the first time in months, Marcus felt something he had almost forgotten: hope. Elena was alive. She was awake. She wanted to fight for their marriage. Whatever came next, they would face it together. Specific details that Derek had included in his letters. Their arguments about children, their sleeping arrangements, Elena's work schedule, his visits to the bar on Friday nights. This was information that only a handful of people would have known. "The police want to interview both of you when Elena wakes up," Sophia said. "They need to go through your social circles, your coworkers, your friends, and family. Someone you trusted gave this information to a dangerous criminal." Marcus looked down at Elena, still unconscious and vulnerable, and felt a profound sense of failure. Not only had he been unable to protect her from Derek Hutchinson, but someone in their own social circle had actively helped in her victimization. As the sun began to set outside the hospital window, Marcus realized that Elena's recovery was going to be about more than healing from her physical injuries. They were going to have to figure out who had betrayed them and why. They were going to have to rebuild not just her health, but their ability to trust the people closest to them. And they were going to have to do it while a dangerous predator was still out there, possibly planning his next move. The vigil was just beginning. As they walked toward the hospital entrance, Marcus realized that everything he thought he knew about their marriage, about Elena's reasons for wanting a divorce, about the distance that had grown between them, was wrong. The truth was more complex and more devastating than he had ever imagined. And now, as they approached the intensive care unit where Elena lay unconscious, he had to confront not only the possibility of losing her, but the knowledge that he had failed to protect the person who had been protecting him all along. Whatever Sophia was about to tell him, whatever secret Elena had been keeping, he knew instinctively that it would change everything he thought he knew about his marriage, about his wife, and about himself. The drive to the hospital would give Sophia time to explain, time to reveal whatever devastating truth had driven Elena to such desperation. But as they walked toward Sophia's car, Marcus realized that he wasn't sure he was ready to hear it. Some secrets, once revealed, could never be unknown again, and some truths were more painful than any lie.